It's July 1st, 2019, and the entire NBA is on the edge of their seat as we're about to sit back and watch one of the greatest free agency periods in NBA history. Thanks to the likes of LeBron James in 2010 and even more recently Kevin Durant in 2016, in addition to the friendly culture that the AAU basketball games have established for youth basketball players, player movement was at an all-time high, mainly because a lot of members of the NBA and a lot of players in the NBA are already well acquainted with one another and are very friendly with each other. But there were several questions that NBA fans wanted the answers to. For one, the Lakers have just acquired Anthony Davis from the New Orleans Pelicans. Will they be able to acquire Kawhi Leonard as well to form a super team? Will Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving wind up signing with the New York Knicks? The Philadelphia 76ers were literally a bounce away from making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Do they attempt to run it back and win a championship? And after being 1 year removed from making it to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals, the Rockets were decimated in the playoffs last year, this time with Chris Paul being fully healthy and able to play. How do they build a team that is good enough to beat the Golden State Warriors? Well, we know what ends up happening because all of this is fairly recent, but as of yesterday, we received word that the current Houston Rockets roster that you see wasn't the roster that they were planning initially. As a matter of fact, the Houston Rockets that you see before you, the one that had the Oklahoma City Thunder trading Russell Westbrook to reunite with his former teammate James Harden, wasn't the trade that the Houston Rockets initially sought out in order to improve their team. And this all happened because of one man, one person, and one decision that I couldn't wrap my head around at the time, and I'm starting to understand now today. And that person is Jimmy Butler. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever damn near nicked your ball sack or completely ended up chopping your dick off? Well, there's a company here that's sole mission is to prevent this from ever happening again, and they are called Manscaped. Manscaped designed a perfect shaver to ensure that you never nick your balls again, called the Lawnmower 2.0, and as you can see, it's also waterproof and you could use it on other areas other than just your balls. Now, this company is so legitimate that they were able to secure a huge investment from Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban. And I also got a promo code for you guys to use for 20% off. Use promo code TheFlightMike to get yourself a nice little discount whenever you shop for Manscaped products. So it's July 1st, 2019. I'll tell you where I was at the time. I'm in the midst of doing my free agency stream, trying to rebuild my channel, keeping you guys updated with all of the latest moves while also providing my analysis live. And if you guys were if there's anyone that was in one of those streams, let me know in the comment section down below because you are truly a day one. But there's a point in the stream where I asked my followers on Instagram, who's the better sports reporter? Molly Karam or Rachel Nichols? So I asked in an IG story, Molly or Rachel, as a poll. Well, I also had a date that night with a woman named Molly, and she saw the story, so you can imagine where this goes. She blocked me on all social media, ghosted me that very night, and I officially had no plans that night. I would then go home and make a video on D'Angelo Russell being traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Golden State Warriors, and that would be my first official video that broke the 50,000 view mark in over 3 years. So shoutouts to Molly for ghosting me, but my second video would be on Jimmy Butler, and it was titled, Jimmy Butler is like the girlfriend you are glad you never had. And the message of this video is no matter what, Jimmy Butler will never get what he wants in the NBA, and at that moment in time, I'm sure we can all agree that it was very confusing to figure out what Jimmy Butler was seeking in a team that he could commit to in the long term. The reason for this is if you look at Jimmy Butler's history, he was developed by a Chicago Bulls organization that is now deemed incompetent due to their recent struggles. And at some point, he was so good in the 2016 to 2017 NBA season that he was able to practically replicate Derrick Rose's MVP season statistically, although it yielded different results. Not wanting to be part of a team that wasn't contending for a championship, while also wanting to be a leader and alpha dog on the team that he currently is on, the Bulls traded Jimmy to be reunited with his former head coach and several of his former teammates. The Minnesota Timberwolves, also known as the Minnesota Timber Bulls, because Tom Thibodeau would go on to sign several of his former players, such as Taj Gibson, Derrick Rose, and Luol Deng. So Jimmy Butler pretty much got traded from a scenario that he didn't want to be in to the same team practically. Now, the awesome part of the trade is that Jimmy Butler wanted to be a veteran leader in a locker room, but he also wanted to compete for a championship. The Wolves had the pieces to make that happen. They had 2 former number 1 overall picks in Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, 2 extremely promising number 1 overall picks. Wiggins was deemed as a once-in-a-lifetime prospect, whereas Towns was the ideal modern NBA stretch center that could rebound, bang in the post, and also hit 3-pointers. But the trio would not see much success as they would result in a disappointing first-round exit where Jimmy Butler would also demand a trade the very next season as a result of not seeing Andrew Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns being as committed to winning as he was. On the Philadelphia 76ers, he was once again on a team with a smorgasbord of talent as he would team up with Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, and JJ Redick. The Sixers came within a bounce away of the Eastern Conference Finals, and Jimmy Butler would enter free agency once again. And this is how everything changed, because the Houston Rockets are kind of disappointed. They were really close to finally being the team that could beat the Golden State Warriors a year ago, but it appears to be that the Rockets took a step back. And Daryl Morey's the type of guy where if something doesn't work, he's not going to run it back. The Rockets, without a doubt, had a need at the 3 position, and they definitely had to change their team somehow. So they really also wanted to always add Jimmy Butler to their team. So much so that they offered multiple draft picks to the Minnesota Timberwolves to trade for Butler prior to him being traded to the Sixers. And according to Tim McMahon, the Rockets wanted to pay Jimmy Butler the 4-year max. This made Jimmy Butler ecstatic because he would be teaming up with CP3 and James Harden, 2 players that were frustrated by the narrative surrounding their inability to succeed in the playoffs. They had trades lined up to shed the salary to do so. So pretty much what was going to happen was the Rockets were ready to trade Clint Capella and Eric Gordon to pay Jimmy Butler the max. The Rockets felt very good about their chances, and then all of a sudden, Jimmy Butler ghosted them. Now, the Rockets are currently 5th place in a competitive West, and I'm not sure how much of an improvement the addition of Jimmy Butler would have been if they were to lose Clint Capella and Eric Gordon as well. Honestly, from the sound of it, the Rockets are losing their interior finisher, the guy that catches all those alley-oops that James Harden and Russell Westbrook lob it to, and one of their best 3-point shooters and scorers in return for one great scorer in Jimmy Butler. I would expect Butler to play more like the Philadelphia 76ers version of himself, although with a little bit more of a statistical inflation because the Rockets play at a very fast pace. But why would Jimmy choose to go to the Miami Heat? Well, you have to think, Jimmy Butler is extremely competitive. He wants to be the guy, but he also wants to play for a stable organization in a nice area and be a max contract player. And that's exactly what he got. Eric Spoelstra, the head coach of the Heat, has been their coach for the last 10 years. Pat Riley has been there for a while as well. And you never hear of any front office drama with the Heat, and they are consistently committed to making sure their players are in phenomenal shape, as we saw with Dion Waiters' transformation 2 years ago. Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat were a perfect marriage, and as likely as it may have seemed at the time, they are the number 2 team in the Eastern Conference, just based off of the culture they have established in Miami. At the time of this video, Jimmy Butler is currently averaging 20 points, 6 rebounds, 6.5 assists, and is tied for the league lead at 2.4 steals per game. But what's fascinating is the domino effect that this one decision resulted in. So think about it. The Rockets' plan B was to trade Chris Paul to the OKC Thunder for Russell Westbrook, which wouldn't have been possible if Kawhi Leonard didn't lure Paul George out of OKC, by the way. But the Thunder initially wanted to trade Russell Westbrook to the Miami Heat. But that never materialized because the Heat were not willing to part with players like Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro for Russell Westbrook, which is something we should all appreciate, by the way, because in an age that sees teams trying to hoard young talent to ship them off to another team for a proven star, the Miami Heat are doing the exact opposite, trying to retain as much of their youth as possible because they have faith in their ability to develop young talent, and as they should. Once again, they are currently number 2 in the East. But once the Westbrook and CP3 trade occurred, the Heat were actually in talks with the Thunder about CP3. But those talks broke down because each side put a different value on Chris Paul. The Thunder view him as an asset, whereas the Miami Heat would view him as a player that was not worth his contract. So the Heat would stand pat with Jimmy Butler as their go-to player in closing situations and their veteran presence, but he's also supplemented by the veteran point guard Goran Dragic, who was also almost traded to the Mavericks this offseason as well. What scenario do you think would have been better? Do you think the Heat would have been better with the addition of Chris Paul or Westbrook without players like Tyler Herro or Bam Adebayo? Of course not. If you have CP3 or Westbrook starting for the Heat, that means this year's second best rookie, Kendrick Nunn, would get no minutes at the point guard position, which means that instead of getting incredible value for a player that you are barely paying, you would be getting a marginally better player who is 31 years old and has a max contract. Yes, that's right. I'm sorry, Westbrook fans. Russell Westbrook is only marginally better than Kendrick Nunn. And at the time of this video, Russ has a PER of 15.8 while also contributing 0.6 win shares to the Houston Rockets, whereas Kendrick Nunn has a PER of 12.7 while also contributing 0.8 win shares to the Miami Heat. This is by far Russell Westbrook's worst season as a player since his rookie year efficiency-wise. He's shooting terribly from three, and does anyone want to actually guess what Russell Westbrook's three-point percentage is? I'll give you a moment. It's pretty freaking bad. It's 22%. And if Russ continues playing like this for the Rockets throughout the year, I can even see the Rockets exploring a trade for him because the entire Houston Rockets philosophy revolves around them shooting the three-point shot effectively on offense. And to be honest, way back when I made a video on the trade to begin with, this was one of my concerns when they traded Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook. Nobody seemed to talk about at the time Russell Westbrook's regression as a three-point shooter. He went from a 34% shooter from three in his MVP season to a 29% three-point shooter last season, all the way to a 22% shooter this year, probably because he has to take more threes this year. But that's a different video for a different day. I didn't want this to turn into a Russell Westbrook slander video. The research just kind of shocked me as I was making the video, and I had to bring it to your attention.